Not every wedding ring means love. Sometimes the I do you say at the altar is the same one that gives someone permission to steal your entire life story. This is one of those stories you hear and think, that would never happen to me, until it does. Gary just wanted a fresh start at 60. He just wanted affection, but he became the target of a woman who didn't want to love. She wanted to inherit, and she did it with a calculated plan, using sweet words to cover up the worst kind of betrayal. Want to know how far she was willing to go? Gary Myers had made peace with the idea of growing old alone. After Margaret passed, he wasn't looking for love anymore. He just wanted peace, routine, and to honor her memory. But life has a funny way of knocking when you think you've locked all the doors inside. It was at a grief support group at church where he met Linda. She seemed genuine, with that sweet smile and the perfect words at just the right moment. What Gary didn't know was that not every closeness is affection. Sometimes it's strategy. He didn't notice it back then, but Linda was already asking too many questions. She wanted to know about his house, his kids, his finances, his pension, his investments. She masked curiosity as empathy. And Gary, as emotionally vulnerable as he was, mistook listening for love. That's how most betrayals begin, with someone who pretends to understand you, just to learn where to stick the knife. She said she was touched by Margaret's story, but what she really wanted was everything Margaret left behind. Betrayal doesn't happen overnight. It's planted slowly, in the trust built day by day. Linda brought cakes on Sundays, made coffee just like Margaret used to. To the neighbors, she was a blessing in Gary's lonely life. But behind the scenes, she was gathering information, connecting dots, building a plan. Emotional theft is just that. Someone entering your life not to love you, but to quietly dismantle everything. And before you realize it, even your past has been stolen. Like so many men his age, Gary thought he was getting a second chance. And there's nothing wrong with wanting that. The problem comes when hope makes you ignore the red flags. A classic example? When someone is more interested in the origin of your pension than in the stories of your childhood. Someone who wants a partner doesn't probe into your retirement fund. They want your soul. And Gary, in that moment, couldn't tell the difference between affection and a setup. What makes this story even more cruel is the emotional manipulation Linda used. She said things like, "You deserve to be happy again," and "Your wife would want this for you." She used Margaret's name as a key to unlock emotional vaults. It was her way of taking revenge on time itself. She never got what Margaret had, so she decided to steal it. Steal space, legacy, memories. A silent battle between the past and the present. Except the present was wearing a mask. And that's where the real danger lies. When loneliness makes you open doors without checking who's knocking. Gary was in love, yes, but he was also completely unarmed. And when you're unarmed, every touch feels like comfort. But that touch, little by little, would become pressure, possession, and control. He'd only understand it later when she started getting too interested in certain rooms in the house and certain stories from the past. Gary's house wasn't just made of bricks and wood. Every corner held a story, a smell, a trace of Margaret. He still had his morning coffee by the same window. The picture frames still told stories from decades past. Linda complimented everything. The handcrafted furniture, the old tapestries, the books arranged just how Margaret left them. But the way she admired it all was just too much for someone supposedly in love with the present. She wasn't just enchanted, she was evaluating. Funny how theft, when it's well planned, doesn't start with a break-in. It starts with compliments. Linda asked where Gary got the couch, who picked the chandelier, whether the deed was stored at home. She called it curiosity, but it was data gathering. Every answer Gary gave was another clue. And with each new story he shared, her smile grew, not out of empathy, but out of strategy. Slowly, the house stopped being his. Betrayal isn't always physical. Sometimes it shows up in the eyes of someone who seems present, but is already planning to leave. Linda asked if Margaret had left everything in his name. She questioned why there were so many old things everywhere. Said he needed to freshen up the place. But deep down she wanted to erase everything. Not for style, but for dominance. She wanted Margaret's identity gone so she could take over. Entirely. Gary started noticing a pattern. Everything that held emotional value made Linda uncomfortable. The wedding china, too old. The framed love letters, too sentimental. The photo with the ring sealed in glass, too morbid. What she never admitted was that each of those items stood in her way. She needed to erase the past to rob the present. A revenge mission against someone who was no longer there to defend herself, Margaret. And look, this isn't rare. Many people enter the lives of older folks with the exact same script. They fake care, fake support, and start stripping away the walls, the albums, the history. It's subtle. First a picture goes missing, then a piece of furniture, then a document. It's like they want to rewrite your story, but using someone else's ink. Gary, blinded by the affection he'd longed for, didn't catch on. But the cracks started showing, and so did the discomfort. Linda often talked about renewal. She used pretty words to wrap up her demolition, change, new beginnings, updates. But when someone truly loves you, they don't destroy what came before. They build on it. Gary had no idea, but the house was already being transformed, not with paint or new furniture, but with hidden intentions. And when someone starts redesigning your life without you in the plan, it's time to pay attention. Because the next move often comes with a ring. Gary had always been a methodical man, but with Linda, he made exceptions. In just a few months, she had a copy of the house key, a say in the bills, and picked their weekend plans. When she brought up marriage, she used an emotional pitch. Margaret would want you to be happy again. That hit Gary right in his soft spot. And that's where danger hides, when guilt from the past becomes leverage for the present. He agreed, and way too fast. The wedding was simple, almost quiet. Linda said she didn't want attention, that all that mattered was love. But the moment they signed the papers, things shifted. Within 2 weeks, she was asking Gary to update documents, add her to joint accounts, and legalize their assets. All for security. But really it was the beginning of a silent robbery. And not just of his money, it was symbolic. She wanted Margaret's place, fully. What many don't realize is betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it comes in the form of domestic reorganization. Linda began removing photo frames from the shelves. Then the quilts Margaret had sewn disappeared. The books were donated to clear the air. Gary questioned it, but she always answered sweetly, "Honey, it's just a new chapter." And it was. A chapter where he was slowly losing everything, without even noticing. This kind of revenge is sophisticated. There's no yelling, no confrontation, just quiet erasure. Before you realize it, the past has been stripped from the walls, from memory, from the will. It's like Linda was trying to write a new story, using Margaret's paper and pen. And the cruelest part? She did it all with love. A cold, calculated, strategic love. From the outside, people saw a happy couple. But inside, Gary was living through an emotional heist masked as romance. If you think this is an exaggeration, think again. How many whirlwind marriages have you seen between lonely widowers and people who seem too good to be true? It's not a coincidence. It's a formula. One step at a time. The photo albums disappear, but a new flat screen appears. The old furniture's gone, replaced with a modern sofa. Each swap cuts the emotional thread that connected Gary to the life he built with love and effort. But blinded by hope, he let it continue. It was only when Linda brought up restructuring the finances that Gary felt a chill down his spine. That gut feeling with no logical explanation, but one that screams, something's wrong. He ignored it. After all, how do you question someone who calls you my angel? But while he hesitated, she was acting. And when betrayal starts showing up on paper, with signatures, permissions, and transfers, love has already turned into a plan. And the plan is in motion. The first hit didn't come from a fight or an argument. It came in an envelope. Gary opened what he thought was a routine bank statement, only to find a shock. $174,000 had been transferred from his oldest account, the one he'd had since the Margaret days. The account he used for everything: retirement, emergency fund, investments. The weirdest part? The authorization form had his signature, but he never signed anything. This kind of theft doesn't wear a ski mask, it wears a wedding ring. Linda had full access to the house and documents. She knew where Gary kept copies of his ID, his notarized signature, even old passwords. And she wasn't acting alone. Enter her brother, Charles Whitmore, a financial advisor Gary had only met twice, and both times seemed coincidental. But now, Charles was at the center of a bank fraud scheme that felt more like a betrayal planned with precision. Gary went to the bank looking for answers. The manager received him politely but with visible discomfort. "Are you absolutely sure you didn't sign this, Mr. Myers?" A question that already carries doubt. That's when betrayal hurts most. When the very system meant to protect you starts questioning you. As if Gary was the scammer. As if the victim had imagined it all. Standing there, staring at a forged signature, he realized this wasn't just emotional manipulation. It was legal, financial, real. The most twisted part? Love became her alibi. Who would believe that this sweet woman who baked pies on Sundays and called him my love was capable of engineering a financial scam? But that's exactly what happened. Linda used time as a weapon. She earned trust, gained access, built routine. Then when Gary was at ease, she struck. It was emotional fraud with bank receipts, every odd charge, every fake signature. It all clicked. Too late. This kind of financial betrayal happens more than you think, especially to older men who are widowed, isolated, or emotionally vulnerable. The person comes in as a partner and slowly takes over everything. "Let me handle this, babe." And suddenly, help turns into control. Then control turns into money disappearing. Gary lost more than just dollars. He lost the sense of security. That deep belief that everything he and Margaret built was safe. It wasn't. And when the ground starts crumbling beneath you, survival mode kicks in. Gary knew he needed to find out what else was at risk. If $174,000 disappeared silently, what else was being sold or signed without his knowledge? The house, his assets, his very name? He felt like he was being erased piece by piece. But for someone who's been fooled like that, the real pain isn't just the loss. It's the deception. And that, my friend, demands more than courage. It demands action. And a serious comeback. When Gary finally confronted Linda about the $174,000, she didn't flinch, didn't deny, didn't tremble, didn't even stutter. She cried, and with rehearsed calm said she was just trying to organize their finances for the future. She talked about planning, stability, love. That's what makes this kind of betrayal so dangerous. It comes wrapped in good intentions. While Gary spoke from the heart, Linda was working off a script. And when one person's in love, and the other has a strategy, the ending writes itself. Linda called herself a financial caregiver, said she was good with numbers, had helped other elderly neighbors. Gary, shaken, wanted to believe her, but his gut kicked in when he found a forgotten statement on the table. A recent transfer of $38,000 to a bank account under Charles's name, her brother, in another state, with no explanation. For anyone paying attention, that right there was proof. The theft was a family operation. What Linda did is what many modern scammers do. They slowly blend into the victim's routine until they seem essential. She ran errands, paid bills, answered phone calls in his name. Bit by bit, Gary's independence became dependence. His bank password was changed for convenience. His bills were rerouted to her email. And when control shifts hands like that, the risk of collapse skyrockets. That's what happened. And the worst part? It all looked like care, but was actually control. Revenge may sound harsh, but it's the only word that fits when someone destroys the memory of a true love just to take what they never built. Linda didn't want financial security. She wanted the spot Margaret left behind. Not for love, but for conquest. It was like she was competing with a woman who had already passed. And that, my friend, is a silent war. Except in this war, the weapons were disguised as kindness. But the damage was real. By this point, Gary couldn't sleep at night. His pillow had turned into a courtroom. Every memory of Linda came with suspicion. Every smile felt rehearsed. He knew he was being drained, but a part of him still hesitated, because admitting he'd been tricked by someone who claimed to love him, that was brutal. It meant admitting that loneliness led him into a trap, that his emptiness made him blind, and that the cost of that blindness was a fortune. That's when Gary decided to dig deeper. He gathered bank statements, tracked account activity, tore through old drawers, scanned every document, and what he found chilled him. Linda had been slowly emptying retirement funds, selling stocks in his name, and initiating real estate transfers he didn't even know about. And if, up until then, the robbery had been emotional and financial, the next step was going to be something far more brutal and irreversible. All Gary wanted was a peaceful weekend with his grandson, like old times. 2 quiet days away from the chaos, away from Linda, away from the doubts. But when he came back, the hit was instant. A red and white sign waved in the front yard. For sale. His house. The home he and Margaret built together. He thought it was a mistake, but it wasn't. It was the next chapter of betrayal. And this time it wasn't just emotional. It was territorial. The deed, once solely in Gary's name, had been transferred to Linda's. How? A small clause added to the marriage contract. The one he signed without reading, trusting it was just paperwork. One signature, and boom. The foundation of his life was up for sale. And the worst part? Linda already had a buyer lined up. She'd appraised it, calculated the profit. She planned it all. What she didn't plan for was the silent rage of a man betrayed. This kind of robbery hits different when it's your home. It's not just about the bricks, it's about everything that grounds you. Margaret had picked out every detail in the kitchen. The garden was planted by their own hands. Their bedroom still had the lamp she turned off each night. Selling that house wasn't just a sale. It was a declaration of war on his past. Revenge against memories Linda could never control. That's why she had to erase them, steal them, burn them. When Gary asked why, Linda answered with her usual sweet, manipulative tone, "Honey, the house is too big for us. Let's start over." What she didn't say was that her new beginning didn't include Gary. It was a lie wrapped in concern. But behind the soft voice there was urgency, paperwork, and schemes. She knew if he waited too long to act, she'd sell everything and vanish. And he'd be left with nothing, not even a floor beneath him. Gary was in shock. For days he wandered the house like a man grieving. He touched the walls, the furniture, stared at old photos with tears in his eyes. It felt like mourning, but not like when Margaret passed. This was worse, because now the grief came with guilt. Guilt for trusting, guilt for being fooled, guilt for letting loneliness open the door to betrayal. But in that emptiness, something reignited, the fire of survival. And when pain mixes with anger, action is born. Gary stopped hesitating. He found the marriage documents, brought them to an old lawyer friend from his accounting days. He laid everything out: photos, bank records, voice recordings. What looked like a simple marital dispute quickly turned into a full-on investigation of fraud and theft. It was time to fight back. And if Linda thought he'd go down quietly, she didn't know the strength of a man who lost everything, except his pride. Gary was never the fighting type. He always believed time healed all things, that divine justice would handle the rest. But this time, he realized, sometimes time needs help. And divine justice, it needs evidence. What he went through wasn't just a romantic betrayal. It was a legal, emotional, and financial robbery. He had to act coldly, strategically, with a clear head. So he went to someone who knew how to play that game, an old lawyer friend who came out of retirement just for him. Together, they started piecing it all together. They collected proof of transfers, audio clips of Linda talking about the assets, documents with forged signatures. Each file was a piece of the silent revenge Linda had built. And the deeper Gary dug, the more he found. Money moved into secret accounts, contracts signed in someone else's name, properties in the process of being sold without his knowledge. The woman sleeping next to him wasn't his partner. She was his predator. The courtroom felt like a movie scene. Linda, looking tired and defeated, tried the same old act. She cried, said she was in love, tried to play the victim. But the judge had seen this play before. The documents didn't lie. The signature was forged. The transfers were unauthorized. The marriage was a tool of manipulation. This was betrayal with paperwork, planning, and wire transfers. And when the truth hit the room, her mask collapsed. The verdict was clear: annulment of the marriage due to bad faith, immediate freezing of all assets acquired during the union, and a criminal investigation launched against both Linda and Charles. Gary didn't smile. There was no joy, just silence. A heavy silence of someone who won, but knows what it cost him. Because justice doesn't erase damage, but it makes space to rebuild. And that alone was already a kind of healing. A breath after months of suffocation. After the hearing, Linda left the courthouse in disgrace, yelled at and humiliated. She tried blaming her brother, claimed she didn't know anything, but the evidence said otherwise. Gary stood firm, watching her, a mix of relief and sorrow in his eyes. The woman who once claimed to love him tried to destroy his past, steal his present, and bury his future. But she failed, because he fought. And more importantly, because he refused to be a victim. He chose to write his own comeback. But the battle wasn't over. Now that justice had validated the scam, Gary needed to rebuild. Recover what was his, protect what was left, and most of all, restore something no one could see. Trust. Trust in others. And in himself. Because even if you get the money back, the assets, the deeds, there's something only time can heal. Soul damage. And in that quiet restart, Gary realized the real value wasn't in what Linda tried to take, but in what she never even got close to touching. Once the dust settled, Gary stood alone in the house. The same house that was nearly stolen, nearly sold, nearly erased. He walked slowly through each room, like a man entering a sacred place. He ran his fingers over the furniture, breathed in the wood scent, smiled softly at old photos. And right there he understood. Linda tried to destroy all this because she knew she'd never belong to it. Her betrayal wasn't just against him, it was against a legacy, against a life that deserved respect. It wasn't easy to heal, but Gary learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering. Without letting the pain take the lead, he didn't become cold or bitter. He became aware. He realized that the real inheritance Margaret left behind wasn't money, a house, or any account. It was values, loyalty, dignity, and those can't be stolen. No theft, no emotional revenge has the power to erase that, because respect can't be bought. It's lived. Gary's story became a warning in the community. People started opening up about similar experiences, older men tricked by younger partners, fast marriages with hidden motives, trust being exchanged for signatures. He began getting invited to speak at support groups, retirement communities, church meetings. And in every word he spoke, there was more than advice. There was lived experience. There was strength. There was a survivor. Today, Gary doesn't seek revenge, because he learned that justice, when served smartly, is worth more than any impulsive payback. What he wants now is awareness. He wants to show that betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes with soft kisses and fake affection. And the worst theft isn't of your bank account. It's the attempt to erase your life story. Margaret may be gone, but she left something Linda never had. Integrity. And that kind of legacy? It lasts. He still lives in the same house. Didn't change a thing. Kept every detail intact. Not out of attachment, but out of honor. The letters, the photo frames, the bookshelf Margaret used to arrange alphabetically, all still there. And once in a while, when he looks at something old, he smiles. Not out of sadness, but because he knows he won. He overcame the con, the trauma, the storyline that almost swallowed him. That's true healing. That's winning from the inside out. But Gary's story isn't just about loss. It's about boundaries, choices, and rebuilding. He was betrayed, robbed, and humiliated, but he refused to stay buried. And if you made it this far thinking this ends with a broken man, think again. Because sometimes those who survive the worst have the most powerful stories to tell. And Gary had one more thing to say, something that would hit deep in the hearts of others who've walked a similar road. If this story hit a nerve, it's because deep down you know, betrayal doesn't announce itself. It wears a disguise. And the worst kind of theft isn't the one that drains your bank. It's the one that steals your peace while you're looking the other way. How many red flags have you ignored? How many people are close to you and for all the wrong reasons? If this made you think, drop a comment below. And hey, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell so you don't miss the stories no one else dares to tell.